like to welcome you and congratulations on the book.
Thank you, Valerie.
And thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Tell us, why did you write the book?
I wrote this book because people were after me. They said that, look, there are very, very few CEOs who get to be in 3 separate continents, who get to be in so many countries on the ground, who get to be in 6 big companies, and who get to have a steady record of turnaround and transformation. It's very, very rare. There must be a common string of things that you did, and wouldn't it be great if you could share that with lots of people who could benefit from it? And that was the motivation for doing my book. I'm doing it for that reason. In fact, the royalties are going to be donated to charity. So I'm only doing it because I just wanted to give something back.
Very nice to hear that. What makes Reinvent different from other books on leadership?
There are lots of common ideas, but maybe one thing that's different here is that I actually did it in different situations. So it's not like I'm observing a lot of CEOs in different places and seeing if there's a common string of things that they did. This is one person who did it from the ground up in many different places, and it seemed to work every time. And then the most recent opportunity was the Bausch & Lomb experience, where I was not the CEO, but the person who used the playbook was my person from Sharing Plow. And it's really very gratifying to see that it worked again very dramatically in that company. So that gave me even more confidence that this playbook does work. And the other aspect, I think, which I do write about a lot, is that don't only think about reinventing the team or reinventing the company. Think about reinventing yourself. It always begins on the inside. If you make yourself strong on the inside, then it becomes a lot better to make other people strong on the outside.
In fact, you start the book with that concept. You talk about reinventing yourself and then reinventing your environment.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Reinventing yourself means you have to be authentic, you have to be focusing on being connected with people, and then you must build that sense of purpose. Because if you can build a sense of purpose for yourself and also build a sense of purpose for the organization, that can be a very powerful way to move people's mindsets. That's a very powerful way to get cultures to change in the right direction. The sense of mission is a very powerful tool. But you need to have that first for yourself. So in some ways, what applies to the environment also applies to yourself. This book really talks a lot about self-awareness, humility, looking at yourself in the mirror, making sure you're on the right path, in addition to making sure that the organization is on the right path.
You know, much of it was the human side, and you talk about emotional IQ.
Yes. Raw IQ is just being able to make good decisions. Emotional IQ or EQ is really your maturity in some ways, your ability to be self-aware, to be aware of people around you, to understand that people have egos, and to be able to look past the egos, to see what moves people. There's also an empathy element in EQ. I think that's very important for leaders, to be empathetic to the people, to care and to really show that they care. So EQ is a very powerful tool, and the book focuses a lot on execution and maybe not as much on strategy as many other CEO books, because I think strategy is easier to get to. It's resource allocation, it's getting smart MBAs to give you a lot of help, good consultants. It's the execution which is so important, and that's where culture change is so important. Executing the strategy means you've got to show your own authenticity as a leader so that people will believe you. And if they believe you, then they will follow you and implement very effectively. And the other aspect is to create a culture where people share with each other and care for each other and collaborate with each other. Nowadays, it's very hard to succeed if you're going to be a silo operator. You really need to be able to collaborate very well.
You know, what I'm hearing is the ability to execute a certain culture that drives the business in a positive direction. And one of the key concepts you share with us in the book, you talk about how important integrity is, and in fact you share a very lovely personal story about your father, how he was chosen in the 1970s by the then Prime Minister of Pakistan to be the ambassador to India because of his integrity.
Yes.
And yes, it is extremely important. I can't imagine any leader not agreeing, but it's another to execute that in the culture. How have you been able to do that time and time again?
I think if you can build your own authenticity, it becomes a lot easier for people to start to believe you. If you look at what holds companies back, it's the skepticism that the rank and file has about their leaders. They have been given lots of initiatives on how things are going to happen, but the follow-through has not been there because the authenticity wasn't there. But if you have a CEO who truly works on being authentic, who exposes his own feelings and his own concerns to the organization so they see him as a person, as he or she really is, who makes level 2 appointments, the direct team at the top appointments, who also mirror the authenticity that you're trying to seek, then at some point people start to say, well, maybe this initiative, this new change process is for real. And once people start to believe that, you can get much better convergence and much better passionate execution in that direction. And the other thing which is very important is that if you start to succeed, there's a tendency to say, well, we've now achieved victory, now we can take a deep breath and relax. That is always a big challenge for CEOs. How do you keep recharging the system, recharging that sense of purpose so that people keep going for the serial wins?
Hence Reinvent.
Hence Reinvent.
Right, and so to not ever have that status quo, because that's when you can lose your edge.
If you see the history of companies, they go to a high level and then they are no longer great after 10 years. How do you keep recharging yourself and remain strong and remain on the cutting edge? That's a big challenge.
And so, having read the book cover to cover, you begin with start with yourself, you end with start with yourself.
Yep.
From the research we do here at the Conference Forum, being able to deal with reality in its face is so difficult for companies. Why do you think that is? And what are your thoughts on that? What is your advice on that?
I think being able to deal with reality in an honest manner is difficult because, first of all, information gets filtered by many levels.
Okay.
And selective filtration leads to less information than you really should have if it was a much more open system. Also, people want to hear good news and they don't want to hear much about difficulties. And there's a reward system in corporations that those who come up with good news seem to get more brownie points than those who come up with bad news. These are cultural matters that need to be dealt with by changing the culture. But I've always said, look at yourself in the mirror, look at the reality as it is, and also when you look at yourself in the mirror, that means you are in charge of taking ownership for the problems and doing something about it. It's very easy for people to point the finger at other people, but in the end, what are you going to do to help us move forward in the right direction? That is something I've always tried to say to the people in the companies that I've showed up at.
Yeah, really having accountability and
owning
the
sense
issue.
Of ownership, a
right.
culture of ownership
right.
is very, I think in large companies that culture of ownership starts to dissipate if you don't work at it, because people get very much into their routines, very much into their own silos, and very much into their own comfort zones. And getting people to move outside the comfort zone, to take ownership, is a big task. And a CEO can really make a big difference there.
Fred talks about always maintaining a positive attitude. And I find that's challenging. There are moments where it's just so hard, but you managed to do it and do it across all the companies. And I want your tips. How do you do that?
Well, in some ways, it's again being authentic with yourself. If you are real with yourself and you say, look, there are problems, but I'm going to do something about them. And then try to project a positive attitude to the people. I write in the book that there may be some times when you have to pound the table and show your unhappiness, but generally what you have to show is a fairly calm demeanor, even when things are tough, because people are going to react to you as their leader. If they are sensing that you're very upset and very anxious, and you're only anxious, say, 10%, their anxiety will go up to 50% because they are going to overreact to their leader being so anxious. So it's very important to project a cool demeanor even during times of stress.
It's a good reminder for all of us, starting with myself.
Yes.
What do you want your readers to walk away with from the playbook?
It's really executing the strategy, which is the most important thing, and the best way you execute the strategy is to have a culture that helps you execute the strategy. Sometimes culture is spoken of in a very soft and a very different manner, but culture is hard stuff. Culture helps you execute the strategy, and that's the real takeaway from this book.
Thank you so much, Fred. Congratulations again. The book is Reinvent. It is available. Thank you.